Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Back after a long hiatus, Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
Our senior editor, Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And joining us today, veteran Washington journalist, veteran not pundit really, but reporter, best-selling author, host of the now essential almost daily two-way podcast and morning meeting, video podcast, television show podcast, and the author of the Wide World of News newsletter, Mark Halperin. Mark, thanks for joining us.
I appreciate the introduction. I'm not a Washington pundit. I haven't lived in Washington in about 30 years.
Okay, well, I haven't lived in Washington for 25 years, but you know what? Things stick. They stick, man. And you're from Washington, so you're a Washington native, so you can't escape so readily. But it is true you are not a Washington pundit. You are, however, and you're not even really a pundit. You're something more interesting because, of course, you made your bones as a reporter and a political director, and you are now running this daily newsletter that attempts to kind of collate political opinion and conventional wisdom on both sides and try to reveal where it is at any given moment and whether or not it seems to reflect reality or irrational exuberance or whatever. And so I will now confess that in private emails with you, I am guilty of as the kind of either irrational exuberance or panic or fear or whatever that you diagnose in others, because I was startled by how good I thought last night's rally, the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz introduction rally was. And I thought as I was watching it and sort of breathing it in that this felt like a win. This all felt like a winning team to me and a winning moment, and that Trump was in real trouble. And only 6 or 7 hours earlier, I had thought that she had made this drastic error in not picking Josh Shapiro when Josh Shapiro was the obvious choice. So my own mood seems to be bouncing around, in desperate need of some kind of medical intervention so that I can stabilize my own emotional reactions to things. But now that it's 12, 14 hours after the rally's conclusion, Mark, where do you stand on whether it has any salience in terms of what we might expect in November? Or is it just another vice presidential introduction as vaporous in the final analysis as others have been?
Well, I followed the same path you did in the last 26 hours or so. I thought it was a disastrous pick, not just because Shapiro would have been better, I thought at the time, but because they're trying to frame her as an extreme liberal, and he's got so much in his record that's extreme liberal. So I thought it was disastrous, not just failure to take advantage of an opportunity, but disastrous. And then, half a day later, seeing the rally and seeing the not just the technical proficiency of what they executed in terms of the staging and the text, but the buddy picture imagery, I felt it was potentially a very positive pick. I think now, having thought about both perspectives and watched Donald Trump on Fox and Friends, I think this election will be won by the side that succeeds in their mission. The Democratic mission, on vivid display in Philadelphia, was to make the election about personality and vibes and Trump bad. And that if the election is about personality, vibes, and Trump bad, Kamala Harris could win every battleground state. If the election is about the Biden-Harris record, and that it's prosecuted not just by the Republican National Committee and Tom Cotton, but by Donald Trump himself, I think Trump will win and could win all 7 battleground states. And so what last night showed, again, quite vividly, was how the Democrats want this election to be run. And the reason I think she's got a good chance to win that definitional fight is because the press is 100% on her side, not 90% on her side, 100%. And the press plays a gigantic role in determining who wins a definitional fight in the presidential campaign.
Matt, so you have been absent from the airwaves here for a bit. I don't know if you got a chance to watch last night or not, but where are you this morning?
I think your initial reactions were probably closer to the mark in the long run than the giddiness from the rally last night. I was just amazed about how the psychology of this election is spilling out into campaign rhetoric. It's about vibes. We're feeling joy. We're confident. We brought the confidence back. It's weird. The other side is weird. It's like we're in Inside Out 2, and all of the emotions are running around trying to get voters to rally behind the Democratic cause. When you step back, though, I think that Harris may have just lost the election with this pick. The key state is Pennsylvania, and she had the opportunity to pick as her running mate the governor of Pennsylvania, who has a 61% approval rating and who's popular and who can perform just as well as Walz can. And she didn't do it. Why didn't she do it? Well, we hear that she really got along well with Walz. Okay. She didn't want someone who could upstage her. Okay. But also, there's this huge fight inside the Democratic Party about the state of Israel. And Josh Shapiro is associated with support for Israel. He is, of course, an observant Jew. And, well, that might just been too much for Kamala Harris. So instead, she goes with the candidate, Tim Walz, who is supported, yes, by Joe Manchin, but also by Bernie Sanders and AOC. On the same day, by the way, that Cori Bush loses her primary in Missouri, and the squad is dealt a very bad blow. So I think it's a good rally. They were excited. But in the long run, there are still some vulnerabilities there that the Trump campaign could possibly exploit.
Okay, because you brought up the question of what role Shapiro's Jewishness, his Zionism, and his observance might have played. I've been struggling with this for weeks, as again, Mark can tell you from private emails. I thought that the minute that
previously private emails,
but I'm not exposing yours. I'm only exposing my own. So they're not. But that I thought that it was demented that Shapiro was even being considered in the first place, because I thought it was pretty clear the Democratic Party had taken too many steps toward the protest movement and toward the idea that there was something dangerous about being overly associated with somebody who was explicitly Jewish or explicitly Zionist, and that this goes back to a long-standing set of ideas and assumptions in the Jewish community about how good it is to be as out in the open as you can possibly be in a world in which people are hostile to Jews. This has not been a big issue in the United States for a very, very long time, as evidenced by the fact that 24 years ago, an observant Jew was on the ticket in a presidential race, chosen very specifically because he was an observant Jew in a party that had a morality problem, and that Joe Lieberman's seriousness of his faith, without involving evangelicalism or Catholicism or mainline Protestantism, all added up to a net positive that I think it's pretty clear he was a net positive for the ticket. But we've had Israel as a controversy now for 10 months for Democrats, and that Shapiro should have taken himself, if Shapiro were like a person interested in preserving the Jewish people, he would have taken himself out of the running at the outset, because it would not be good for him not to be chosen and for this conversation that we are now having to be happening. And the thought experiment I came up with this morning that I'd like to test on you, Abe and Seth, is this. If Shapiro's name were Christopher Gentile, would he be on the ticket today? Being everything else about him, being the same. Everything. He's the governor. He has the approval rating Matt mentions. He's the
Meaning
governor of Pennsylvania.
he volunteered for Israel, like the letter rating campaign.
Even if Chris Gentile
is all that the same,
was a Zionist and did some kind of weird, it went to a kibbutz for 6 months, which a lot of Gentiles have done in their life. Nonetheless, if his name were Chris Gentile, would he be on the ticket today? And I think the answer is unambiguously yes, and that's why this is a tragic moment, even if it was a good night. So, well, Abe,
It depends on whether or not you believe the stories coming out about what's behind the pick from the Kamala camp. I don't. So I'm with you, John. I think Chris Gentile would have been up there on stage last night. I don't think there's nothing, however, to the idea that there was fear that Shapiro could upstage and outshine Kamala in certain areas. I think that's a legitimate concern from her perspective as well. But I do think the fact of his being Jewish was a significant piece of the decision. Yeah.
I mean,
before last night, I thought that there was also something maybe to the outshine thing, but then I watched a high school gym coach from Minnesota completely wash out Kamala, and the realization came to me is that she can't pick somebody who won't outshine her because she's not good enough. And so I felt less like that was a legitimate excuse after watching Tim Walz, not because he was spectacular, but because he was a natural and she's not a natural. And people are going to be talking about his speech. And I really do think that I'm not sure there's anybody she would have picked. Maybe Roy Cooper wouldn't have outshone her. I don't know. But that's actually a hard thing to find somebody who wouldn't bring something to the live show experience that she doesn't.
But look, we already had this experience in 2016 of Hillary Clinton picking Tim Kaine. I apologize, not Tom Keene, Tim Kaine. Introducing Tim Kaine, and then Tim Kaine laying a colossal egg, not only in that introductory performance, but at the convention, and I think even really kind of in the debate with Pence, where I guess they kind of battled to a draw. But I mean, we've seen when this doesn't work, and it really didn't work. And that the surprise with Walz was he came out after Shapiro, who gave a stem winder that was even like on the verge of slight hysteria, I would say, in his desperate effort to look like, he was
feeling his feels.
Yeah. But that Walz came out and go ahead.
No, sorry. Can I tell you what I think actually happened, why he didn't get it?
Yeah.
I think being Jewish and having the positions he does on Israel are a subset of a overall umbrella of why he didn't get it, which is he was trouble of various kinds, and Walz is not, and they don't have time for trouble. This is a sprint. The convention's in a couple weeks, and this is a guy who has enemies in the party. He has enemies in the party ideologically on the left on Palestinians. He's got enemies amongst other governors who think he's too ambitious. He's got enemies who put out all this opposition research on him for 2 weeks that he left unrebutted, which I think was a big mistake if he wanted the job. He has enemies within the elite levels of the Democratic Party who think he's a little too big for his britches. Walz has no enemies. He was endorsed by Bernie Sanders and Joe Manchin. And the Israel stuff, one of her big donors told her, you have to have a good convention to win the election, and you will ruin the convention if you pick Shapiro because of protests and because some people don't like him. And he compounded it. And again, she was going to pick him, I believe, based on my reporting. But he showed up on Sunday with the attitude that John Edwards had when he met with John Kerry to talk about being on the ticket. Let's negotiate my role. Let's negotiate my role in the campaign. Let's negotiate my role if I'm vice president. He said, like every other recent vice president, I'm the last person in the room on big decisions. Waltz said, if you want me in the room, I'll be in the room. But if you don't want me in the room for the last decision, all good. Shapiro on Sunday was a heavy lift. They don't have time for heavy lift. She had to decide right away. There was no more time. And there was no way to pick him without a lot of what Rick Perry would call surus. Waltz, no surus. Everybody on board, the entire party excited. He's got downside too. Matthew might be right. Maybe his downsides are dispositively negative. But picking Shapiro was a big problem. And his religion and his position on with Palestinian Americans was a subset of that. And I don't believe a dominant subset. I believe the biggest thing was he's just got enemies. He's got problems. He's got issues. We don't want issues. We want calm unification of the party.
But wasn't
Okay,
that
well,
known
can I-
before
can I-
he made it into the final two? Like she seemed on the verge
no.
of picking him, and
Yeah.
wasn't all his fights with the progressives over that stuff were known going into it?
So here were the two things not known going into it. And I think they were dispositive. One was that for 2 weeks, he would face, in my experience, an unprecedented barrage in the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times, and elsewhere of a range of negative stories that were turtles on fence posts. Those stories were not shoe leather investigative reporting happening spontaneously. They demonstrated that he had enemies. Then Senator Fetterman, his home state senator, who, by the way, is a pretty big defender of Israel, as everybody knows, he gave an unprecedented, through his aides, through Politico, attack, saying, this guy's too ambitious to be on the ticket. That's a big red flag. This guy's got enemies. Then some of her donors and some of the other governors said to them, again, not known to them before, this guy does not play nicely with others. This guy will be a pain in your ass the entire campaign, and if you win in the White House. And then finally, he walked in on Sunday. They had their meeting. I mean, again, unprecedented because the tightness. They had their meeting. On the day she had to decide, they had the meeting, and he shows up with a bunch of demands. Again, not unusual. Al Gore made such demands. John Edwards made such demands. But she had a choice. The guy with demands and a lot of enemies, or the guy with no enemies. I mean, no enemies. I've not heard a single Democrat say this was a bad pick.
Look, even
And
if
no demands. Comically, no demands.
even
And
if it's
so
a-
I think that was not, those things were not known when she was headed down the path, not just to considering him, but I believe to picking him.
even if it's a subset of the problems that Shapiro may have had, it does fit a pattern with Kamala Harris. She's made 3 big decisions, it seems to me, since she locked up the nomination all of 2 weeks ago, if that. The first was skipping Bibi's speech. The second was meeting with Bibi in private and then coming out alone in front of the cameras and giving a statement where the top was pro-Israel, but the bottom 2/3 was extremely hostile to Israel's self-defense, put it that way. And now we have the third decision, Walz. And Ilhan Omar likes Walz, right? The DSA likes Walz. Granted, everybody seems to like Walz, but it's true that the wrong people, in my view, are really excited about him. And they wouldn't have been excited about Shapiro. They would have had
Paul Bowman was super hyped.
Right. So I think that's indicative of a big problem for the ticket. And that the problem is Israel, because sure, Fetterman doesn't like Shapiro, and Fetterman warned the Harris camp about Shapiro, but the American voter is closer to Fetterman's position on Israel than, it seems to me, Ilhan Omar's, and even, I think, in recent months, to the Biden-Harris view on Israel. And just one more point. All the discussion about Walz, and there's going to be a lot, of course, and no one knows who he is. I think, 70% lacked name ID in the Snap poll.
That's got to be low. That's got to be low. It's got to be 90% didn't know who he was.
So, but the challenge for the Trump campaign is they have a lot of challenges right now. But one of them is they have to make Biden Harris's running mate. They have to connect her to the past 3 years. And she is just pretending as though Biden doesn't exist. I don't think either of Harris or Walz mentioned Biden's name. the 60-second spot that was Harris's swing state debut ad doesn't mention Biden by name. And so she's benefiting from this because if you look at this new NPR Marist poll, she's not being burdened by the Biden economy. That's what Trump needs to make Biden her running mate. The Biden inflation, the Biden border, the Biden chaos in the world. Forget about Walz. It has to be Biden-Harris, even if she's now at the top of the ticket.
Okay, two issues then. One, Israel's not a voting issue for that many people. So the question is, what does it mean that she has made it so central in some weird way to her candidacy? As you point out, like the sort of three major things that she's done involve in some fashion something relating to Israel. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, Israel's one of 10,000 things, and it's all that. She's acting like Israel is a important and determinative matter more than I would were I her, were I she. And I think, and the fact that that's the case not only is unnerving to me, but suggests that she or they know something about their own party's enthusiasm level that I don't wish to be the case, but may well be the case, which is that Shapiro's in a lot of trouble. He's too ambitious. He's like Cassius. Other people don't like him in the party. Maybe other people in the party don't like him because he's a Jew. Maybe other people in the party don't like him because they have started to fall into weird old-time stereotypes about Jews. They're ambitious. They're pushy. You know, they want too much. He came in, he was grasping for power. You know, I mean, the kind of weird undertone of some of the stories that we're reading, assuming either that they may be true, but also what emphasis is being placed on them, has unnerving qualities to it. Because as you say, somebody coming in with a list of, demands and interests can anger people. I'm trying to remember, there was a famous case, and I'm really blanking on it, but there was somebody who went in as the completely obvious vice presidential choice in an interview with somebody and screwed it up. So, it wasn't that. It was actually, no, this was not a vice presidential choice. I'm sorry. It's a story about Steve Goldsmith, the mayor of Indianapolis, who was like an obvious pick to be something or other. And he went into a meeting with Bush, George W., and really annoyed him hugely or something. And then he was out, or say, this can happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's so important to her. Israel is too important to these people in a weird way. You would think that it would be less. All she needs to do is convince America they don't want Trump back. Why is Israel the focus of this? If she has donors who are saying don't do anything relating to Shapiro because it's going to cause a riot at the Democratic convention, and they're right, then we have a big problem in the United States that is not only not going to be resolved by Kamala Harris getting elected, it's going to be exacerbated by Kamala Harris being elected. And people like us right here, right now on this podcast, that is frightening, and fighting it by picking him would have been an interesting tell about where this all goes. And we're about, it looks like, to have a major conflict erupt in the Middle East. And that's where Kamala, standing behind a teleprompter, has to get out from behind the teleprompter and talk. At some point, she has to come out and talk. And if there's a shooting war between Israel and Iran, and Joe Biden is still in his basement, she's got to come out and talk and say things and unnerve people, and I got two things about that. One is, like I say, I don't think Israel is a big voting issue for people, but Americans like Israel and do not like the Arab states and do not like the Palestinian political entities and really don't like Iran. And the older you are, the more you don't like Iran. and she needs older voters because Biden was doing okay with older voters, and then that was one of the things that was ballasting him. And her instincts are going to be to separate herself from Israel, and I don't know how that's going to go for her. That's my proposition. I mean, we don't know, but Mark, she can't play this. She's in the basement except when she wants to give a rally when there's a major world crisis.
Well, you say
Can
she can't. She can. I think she can, because I think the press would largely let her get away with it. And I think she can just read statements. I never want to, particularly in this format, this platform, I never want to minimize how fraught these issues are and how serious. But if you took any Democratic politician, except for Bill Clinton, and you erased any history they had on issues of the Middle East, so they start with just a blank slate, and you put them in the Oval Office, and the entire cast of this podcast sat in there with the person and did exactly what you told them to do, taking into account geopolitics and politics, it's not possible to do well. It's just not. There are too many circles that can't be squared on these developments. And so I think more than you, for her and for the current president and for the previous presidents, I just extend a presumption of grace to them and an acknowledgement that there's just no pleasing people on this. Every move is fraught and dangerous and zero sum to a large degree, except for Bill Clinton, who's never met a zero sum situation because he's Bill Clinton. I think that the reason she's so involved on this is because if she's not, she'll be criticized by you and by others. And because this is a moving target, she has to be two things to win. And if she is those two things, she'll win, I think. Seen as a good steward of a good economy and as a credible, intimidating commander-in-chief. And I know Matthew doesn't think she is or could be either, but I think her team is looking, and they'll do a lot of this business as best they can at the convention. They're looking to prove those two things. And the Trump campaign, if they're do what they're supposed to do, according to every Republican I talk to, will stop focusing on driver's license for people in the country legally in Minnesota and just talk about those two things. Because there's lots of things you could say to undermine her on those two things, including related to Israel.
Okay, taking since my name was invoked, since commentary's institutional standing was invoked, I will take the moment to say that I agree with you that were I the person who was making Israel policy, that I could make a lot of trouble for a Democrat with Democratic constituencies, which is why I thought it was bad that Shapiro was in the conversation at all, and why I would have desperately hoped that he would have said, "This is not my time," and stay out of it. And I'm not joking about this at all. I mean, because I can show you the receipts that I said she can't pick Shapiro in the end, and it's not going to go well that he was in the conversation, because then we have to have a conversation about whether or not one of the two American political parties can't have a Jew at the top of the ticket, and that is not good for the Jews. However, I do think, and I've said since October 7th, and I think a lot of us have said this on this podcast, that being in a war on the winning side is better than being in a war that you start running away from. And that Biden's grave mistake here politically was in getting unnerved about Israel's successes in Gaza and starting to separate himself from them, rather than saying, hold steady, hold tight, you're going to win by March or April, and then we're on the winning side. And then when my party needs to come together to beat Donald Trump, we're going to say, don't you blather at me about the Abraham Accords and stuff like that. I was there when Israel took out Hamas. We're the reason Israel took out Hamas. And he didn't go there because his own anti-Israel left scared the bejesus, if you'll excuse the expression, out of him and them. And that's a missed opportunity. We have an election here of missed opportunities. Now, obviously, that wouldn't have been Biden's missed opportunity because he wasn't going to make it to November. We have Trump picking Vance. We have We have very possibly Kamala picking Walz over Shapiro, given the Pennsylvania issue. We have all kinds of missed opportunities all over the map. That was the missed opportunity of the decade for the United States in terms of its position as a leader of the free world and fighting for good things and American interests.
So my name was also invoked in Mark's answer,
Yes.
and I want to respond by saying he's absolutely right.
Senator Continetti, you
I
have
don't
30
believe
seconds.
she's a plausible commander-in-chief and probably never will, even when she may be commander-in-chief. But nonetheless, I want to talk about something that's happening that I've learned from Mark over the years. Mark is a big proponent of the idea that earned media wins elections, publicity, the press. And right now, the Harris-Walz ticket is in this virtuous cycle. They're winning earned media every day, and the media is behind them. So it's an exponent. It expands, right? It's a force multiplier. However, there were 2 times since she locked up the nomination that she did not win the cycle. The first was when Trump went before the National Association of Black Journalists and talked about her identity, and for a whole day, we were back to talking about crazy stuff Donald Trump says, which is what we had spent the past decade talking about. And whether it hurt him or not, at least people weren't talking about Kamala Harris. And then there was Sunday into Monday, where people were talking about the flash crash in Japan and the economy, and then the looming potential for conflict in the Middle East. Harris's problem, it seems to me, is she now has, she has some runway with her swing state tour this week. That goes into the election, to the convention the following week. After her convention, she's going to have about 2 months there where outside events could come in and to change the news cycle and perhaps force her to improvise. And if we know something about her past performance, when she improvises, she gets into trouble.
Can we talk about her speech last night? Because there were 2 interesting things about it. One of which is the structure of having her deliver a 20-minute speech of introduction of her vice president was a tad unusual. Like, she delivered his biography, which is sort of, because then he did it also. It's kind of odd. It was interesting. It gave her a new subject so that she had something to talk about other than platitudes. But that, on the one hand, I thought it was better delivered than any speech I've heard her give, in the sense that she really had a command of the room. She wasn't letting them interrupt her. She wasn't getting sort of distracted by their applause. She was talking over them, which is always a sign of a speaker who has confidence and doesn't feel like she needs to play off a crowd she already has, which is something J.D. Vance could have used had he delivered a competent speech, for example, at the Republican convention, which he didn't. But that in the entirety of that speech, she did not say, in my estimation, a single memorable sentence or phrase or anything. Nothing. There was nothing to what she was saying. Now, maybe strategically that's fine, because she wants to be this blank slate. She wants to not be Biden. She wants to not be anything. She wants to focus on Trump and say, I'm joy, right? You mentioned Inside Out 2. Like, literally, I'm sorry, I don't think that was this whole thing about how we're feeling joy. I don't want to be like too pop culture centric, but Inside Out 2 is now the 7th highest grossing film in the history of movies. And its lead character is named Joy. And that was like a button pushing. Like, the word joy is a weird word here. Confidence, enthusiasm, excitement, leadership,
joy is like weird in that they very clearly tested a word that they want associated with them, the way they tested one word they want associated with their opponents, sort of like Trump was good at doing in 2016.
Right.
But I think
So,
I think it's interesting that that the speechwriters gave him the more memorable takeaway from the night, which is we're not going back.
Well, she said it. They said it. She said it too.
She said it?
His most
She
memorable
said it, and they
takeaway
said
was
it. The crowd said
was
it.
the couch. The couch crap.
Yeah, the couch. Yeah.
But it's interesting because I feel as if when he said it, because as Seth said, he is a natural up there. That it turned into a chant.
So
He's, Walz is unself-conscious. That's really the thing that defines him as a public speaker. And so the things that come out of his mouth will always sound, like love me or hate me, this is who I am, take it or leave it sort of guy. And people respond better to the perceived authenticity of that sort of thing. And Kamala Harris is, much like Hillary Clinton in this way, one of the most self-conscious politicians in America.
It's interesting because if we want to chart Walz's political journey, it strikes me that he is a perfect example of the 21st century Democratic Party in miniature. He's recruited, first didn't like him, but then he was part of that class of 2006 that Rahm Emanuel, who ran the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, recruited, and they took the House away from the Republicans with a very specific kind of candidate, running them in districts that were Republican, with military records and ordinary jobs, like not that, mostly with military records. So he has the 20-year service in the Army National Guard. And reaching the rank of commander, whatever the rank is that he had reached. And he's a fairly conventional moderate Democrat for the most part during his tenure in the House, which is 12 years. And in fact, when he runs for governor in 2018, he is not the most leftward person in the race. Somebody else named Aaron Murphy was the most leftward person in the race. And when he outlapped Murphy and got the governorship, and he looked at the order of battle in his state and what it was going to take to be successful, he shifted left. He moved left. So he's more calculated and less, like a true believer, I think. I mean, he's more of a guy who found, like Biden or something, has found the center of his own party. And in Minnesota, the center of his own party got radicalized in 2020 by the George Floyd riots and everything, and he just kept being there. So that's where he stood. Mark, does that seem like is that a caricatured analysis of him, or a fair analysis of him?
Based on what I know, it seems right. I confess I wasn't on my radar. I'd heard of him. I knew him when he was a House member. I don't think I've ever met him, which is unusual for me in covering these things, because normally people who get put on the ticket are people I've met just by virtue of doing my job. You said he's representative of the party, and he is representative of that class of people Rahm recruited. But I think one of the things that Republicans are underestimating about his political strength is he's not a career politician. He got into politics very late in life. He's not a lawyer, unusual for someone on a Democratic ticket. And if you were building a candidate in a factory, in a laboratory, again, if Republicans are being honest and not just reflexively negative about him because of a lot of his liberal positions he's taken as governor, veteran, coach, teacher, guy who loves the state fair, little overweight, like these are relatable things.
Not overweight anymore. That's an Ozempic.
Well,
that guy is yet another ad for Ozempic.
Yeah, right.
Look at him in 2022 versus now.
I only included that because I was looking at the state fair video, and he
I know
had his share of corn dogs. But my point is, if you look at his career arc, he's very relatable to normal people. And if you were recruiting for the NRSC or the RGA, and somebody said, "Well, we got a guy who got into politics late, super good with people, teacher, veteran, football coach, who turned the team's record from losing to, no wins to state championship," you'd say, "Yeah, I want to know more about that guy. That's a guy we want to recruit." And I think, again, he's not a perfect candidate. There's no such thing. But I think Republicans are underestimating the power of biography, particularly because, as I said at the beginning, the Democrats want the campaign to be about personality, biography, vibes, and Trump's a bad guy. And he helps with that, despite, Matthew's right, as I thought 24 hours ago, very vulnerable on a lot of positions he's taken. But attacking his positions is a day wasted attacking on inflation and immigration. And I don't know that the Democrats intended this as a trap, but it's shaping up to be a trap.
I would say I've been struck recently by the resemblances between the Harris campaign and the Trump 2016 campaign. Harris has been doing these major rallies. They're filling these arenas, just like Trump did the tentpole rally in 2016. Harris and her crew seem to be having fun. You always want to be the side that's having fun. And Trump was having fun in 2016 in a way he really wasn't hadn't been having it since. And you now have lock 'em up chants in Democratic rallies. In 2016, it was lock her up about Hillary Clinton. Of course, that was, a major sign that we were turning into a banana republic when Republicans chanted it. But now every Harris rally ends up with lock him up, and the media just, oh, the joy. Do you feel the joy? And now we have Walz making this crack about J.D. Vance and the couch. And it's based on a totally false story. And rather than claiming misinformation or Trump spreading fake news, again, it goes unmentioned, and people are talking about what a great natural politician he is. So Republicans complain about it, like I just did, but it does give the Harris-Walz team of an advantage if they're resembling the winning campaign in 2016 rather than the losing campaign.
I want to also just add to that, the just very quickly, the crack about the couch not only mirrors the misinformation and the fake news, but it was a really significant lowering of the tone of the discussion, which is another element of Trump 2016.
I don't think he'll make it again, and I think I understand why you're raising it, and other people have raised it. It's big on social, on Red Social. I think it's another day wasted complaining about a joke he'll never make again, rather than talking about inflation, immigration. Two more things about
why do you think he'll never make it again? I'm just curious because there's two things that keep coming up in the online discourse, and they seem to have found their way into the public discourse, which is Project 2025 and the couch. And Project 2025 comes up. It's every 30 seconds. I'm wondering why you think the couch thing and that type of hit on Vance and Trump in general isn't going to be part of the
it'll continue. I just don't think it'll come out of his mouth, because I think he's been told it was off brand for him, but it will continue. I think two other things about the rallies that are similar to Trump 16, and again, this is going to infuriate Trump because that was his source of his mojo. One is they've crossed over now these rallies into, again, it's early, but I think it's going to be true for the entire 90 days. They're now cultural events. They're political events that are also crossing over to cultural events with pop stars and with her performance level. And I think just as Trump could get 10,000 people literally in any town in America, I think you could send her to a red state now. I think if you send her to Birmingham, she'd get 10,000 people because people are interested in her. They're excited about her. It's something new. It's a show. Friday night, kids, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to a movie, or do you want to go to see Kamala Harris give her rock star performance that you've seen on TV? And that's a real danger to Trump because he's had a monopoly on that.
I have a feeling that the couch joke was important for two reasons. One of which is that Democrats want to know that their candidates are going to take the gloves off. Now, Harris isn't going to take the gloves off except to call Trump a predator and a rapist, which is bad, but at least she has court cases to back it up, right? In this case, it's like he makes this joke. It really lowers the tone, as Abe says, but against whom does it lower the tone? Against the guy who said that Ted Cruz's father assassinated JFK? You can't lower the tone against Trump. He created the world in which there is no point than which you can go lower. And so hitting him in that way, I think, is more delightful to Democrats than people realize. To know that there's somebody there who is going to call Trump out in a Trumpian way on his Trumpian crap. And that's more heartening and more revivifying maybe than we can give it credit for.
That goes
And
with
1,000
the lock him up stuff too, right? Would
That's
follow
right. That's
exactly
the same thing. It's like you're not the only one who gets to play this game. We're going to play this game against you too. And if you like it, we like it.
And by the way, 1,000 Matthew Continentis can fall into 1,000 fainting couches, and the dominant media will never say, "Oh my God, Matthew's upset." They're going to say, "Yeah, Trump's been doing this stuff forever, and we think this is great because, as you just said, John, it shows the Democrats are fighting back and they're hitting Trump hard, which Hillary didn't do, and that's why she."
And they are, because I watched MSNBC last night, and they were giggling. They were giggling with enthusiasm, and they were like, it was like.
But it's not. But not just MSNBC. The New York Times, the Washington Post will never call it out either.
Yeah, but not calling it out, they were actually like supportive of it. So, all right.
Can we talk about vetting before?
Yes,
just briefly,
before we get to the vetting, let me just quickly talk to you about ExpressVPN. Because going online without ExpressVPN is like leaving your laptop unattended in the coffee shop while you run to the bathroom. Most of the time, you're probably fine. But what if one day you come out of the bathroom and your laptop is gone? Everyone needs a VPN. If you connect to an unencrypted network, wherever you do it, at a cafe, at an airport, your online data is not secure. Any hacker on the same network can gain access to and steal your personal data. And it doesn't take much technical knowledge to do that. A 12-year-old could do it who's smart. Your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal info on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops hackers from stealing your data by creating a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. It's easy to use. You fire up the app, you click one button to get protected phones, laptops, tablets, and more so you can stay secure on the go. I use ExpressVPN. I'm happy with it. I got no problems with it. You shouldn't have any problem with it either. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/commentary. That's expressvpn.com/commentary. And you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/commentary. Matt, you wanted to talk vetting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first I'll say I won't be on the fainting couch. I'll be drowning my sorrows at the local bar, but that's it. And I won't be watching the Harris rally. I can tell you that for sure. It'll be smackdown. But it seems to me when I think about what could interrupt the virtuous cycle, which I admit is happening. I mentioned the economy, these fears of recession, the flash crash we had. Markets are here at least are recovering slightly. I talked about the looming conflict in the Middle East. Still nothing happening as we're recording this podcast on Wednesday morning, August 7th. But then there's this third thing, Mark, which I wanted to get your thoughts on, which is the vetting issues. And we had there, again, a few days ago, this story about the second gentleman and the nanny just appear on the Daily Mail, and then he had to acknowledge it in a very circumspect and euphemistic way. And I'm wondering what your take was on that, and whether there still might be a chance in these 90 days that another story just emerges, maybe about Walz, who, again, no one really knows, or more importantly, about Vice President Harris.
So one of the things I try to bat down regularly is when people say, oh, this person's won statewide office in a competitive state, or this person is a sitting senator or a sitting governor or vice president of the United States, and therefore everything to know about them has been revealed. Just not the case. Bill Clinton dodging the draft, George W. Bush's DWI with his teenage sister in the car. It is a different level of scrutiny. And I can tell you that there are people around the vice president who look at the revealing of the story over the weekend and say, is that really the only thing that she or her husband have ever done that has never been made public, that if made public could be a political problem? And the answer is, both in the abstract and in reality, no. And so the question is, if it does happen, would that be the circuit breaker that you posit it might be, as the economy in the Middle East could be on the virtuous cycle? The bar is really high, and we saw that in the case study of the weekend. It is true that he put out a statement to CNN, after which the New York Times, the Washington Post, and most other major dominant media wrote stories about it. Now, are they now doing investigative pieces about it? Are they looking into the questions raised by the Daily Mail, such as, was there actually a pregnancy or a baby? Or was he paying her a lot of money? Those news organizations took on faith the background information from the Harris campaign that said This was disclosed to the Biden campaign in the vet, and this is something that the vice president knew before she married her husband. Those things might be true, but they're asserted as fact by news organizations credulously because they were told to say that by the campaign. So I think that there are three things that are true. One is there's more to their lives that has not been revealed that, if revealed, could be damaging. Two, the bar is very high for the press to actually use that as effectively have that be a circuit breaker on the virtuous cycle. And three, the clock is ticking, right? Like these things are going to have to come out relatively soon, or what's going to happen? They're going to do what Bill Clinton did when these things happened towards an election, which he's going to say, this is phony stuff. It goes to Hunter laptop thing, right? The hot people come forward to say, this is fake. This is meant to Donald Trump, dirty trick, Chris LaCivita, et cetera. So the clock is really ticking. So
Okay,
I think this is the most likely circuit breaker, all those caveats notwithstanding.
A couple of important points that you make here that are vital. First of all, nobody gets vetted anymore by local press because there is no local press anymore. And so there was an understanding when I got in the business, when Mark got in the business, that, people had been through gauntlets getting themselves into serious positions of power. Those gauntlets don't entirely exist except at the partisan level when somebody gets into a race and has a rival who has enough money to do background investigations, to leak things to people, maybe not even regular newspapers, but a website or to put something out on Twitter or whatever. And that hardly even happens anymore. And secondly, even when it happened, this is the blinding problem with the virtue cycle. So let's just go back to 1988 and the famous and evil, terrible, so demagogic, terrible story of Willie Horton and the Willie Horton flyer and all of that. So the Willie Horton story about how Michael Dukakis had championed a furlough policy that had led someone to be let out of jail who then murdered someone was not only a big story in Massachusetts, it was a Pulitzer Prize winning story in Massachusetts. The Lawrence Eagle in Massachusetts, a small town paper, published 175 stories on the furlough program, Willie Horton being one of those stories, and won a Pulitzer Prize at a time when that was a major event in American journalism. The day the Pulitzers were announced, like a major, careers were made. People got $1 million book contracts, stuff like it was a very big deal. And somehow, and Al Gore, running against Michael Dukakis in 1988, brought this up, but it was too late and it was too incendiary because Gore was already thought of as too right-wing and hostile to Black people, and he didn't know how to talk about it. And then it dropped and lay there, and nobody picked it up. And then the Bush people picked it up. And then the virtue cycle media are like, this is racist. How can you do it? Look at this flyer that you printed in Maryland with this picture of Willie Horton on it, showing that you're doing something racist and incendiary. And it was an enormously successful political hit for the Bush campaign because it ignored the virtue cycle. And it went right at a vulnerability that Democrats and liberals, because of their own internal, drives, problems, fears, conclusions, wants, let drop, that it would have been better had it been litigated during the Democratic primary. If it had been litigated during the Democratic primary, it would have been a fact known that wouldn't suddenly have emerged in September or early October to knock Dukakis on his back foot and basically lead to the question that sunk his candidacy at the first debate about if his wife had been raped and murdered, what would, how would he react? And Dukakis didn't know how to answer the question. So we don't know what's coming up, but we do know actually that this is a potential source of. They can silence a lot of things, and they can pretend not to. They can slow the roll on things, but things can still emerge. It's easier now for things to emerge than it was then. The problem is that now we get to the thing I want to talk about, which is Trump in relation to this. What was Trump doing yesterday while this was going on? He's truth socialed out some insane psychotic theory that Biden would show up at the Democratic convention, announce he wanted to run for president again, and debate Trump. So the entire world, while it's time to start prosecuting the case, we have no time. There's 90 days. It's time to prosecute the case against Harris. Trump is going off into attacking Brian Kemp and weird fan fiction fantasies of the debate that he wants to have instead of the debate that he might have. And if you want Trump to win, he is not behaving in a manner that would lead you to believe that he has an idea, a theory about winning, a path to winning, or can conduct himself when the media are going to be so hostile to him to getting messages out over their heads. Anybody want to, I don't know, come at me on this?
I think that this is part of what I was talking about last week when we were talking about the problem of JD Vance, which is the effect that he seems to be having on Trump, which is a kind of defensive crouch and sucking the energy out of the room. The Trump campaign doesn't feel like it's rolling. And I talked about being self-conscious and unself-conscious before. Trump is like, he's got the most sensitive ego, maybe, but he performs as one of the least self-conscious people, right? I mean, making fun of people's disabilities, like on stage, like he's like a comic riffing. He will do anything. He doesn't stick to a script, all that stuff. But we haven't seen any of that stuff. We haven't seen any of the sort of confidence that he performs with. The performance is not there. And I don't know what they're waiting for, but I would say that one of the missed opportunities with both Veeps was that in Harris's case, Shapiro could not be ignored. And in Walls's case, and Walls absolutely can be ignored. If the Trump campaign is smart, they will never talk about Tim Walz or Tom Walz or Coach Walz ever again. He's a non-event. And they'll focus on Kamala. That wouldn't be possible if you had somebody with the talent and the passion and the ambition of Josh Shapiro, and that would have taken some of the heat off. Trump's Veep is in a similar situation in which you can talk about Vance. The only reason they're talking about Vance is like to make fun of him and make these jokes and stuff like that and play on the weird thing. But he doesn't have somebody who demands a kind of attention and energy and carefulness in how you respond to it.
I think there's a simple problem here for Trump, which is that his talent is in personal attacks. And that was made very, very easy when he was up against Biden. Harris and Hillary. Harris is far too protected now. And as Matt says, he's got to tie her to Biden policies. And that is not where his strengths lie. And that is a problem for him.
Well, I want to ask Mark.
The campaign is putting out ads, by the way. We should know that the campaign is putting out ads that are very good on this sort of thing. There's just a sort of divide over the fact that it's not coming from the top of the ticket. It's coming, if you scroll through online, and I think that they're hoping to get it through earned media. But
I wanted to ask Mark about any reporting he may have done about Trump's schedule, because that's what leaps out to me. Yeah. They have a rally planned for this weekend in Montana.
No, they had one for tomorrow or today in North Carolina that had to be canceled.
I think it was just Vance was going to be in North Carolina, and so Vance is on the road this week, but Trump isn't. And his big announcement was that he's going to sit for an interview with Elon, probably on the social media platform X, on Monday. But have you heard anything about this, Mark, or done any reporting? Like, why isn't Trump out there? I mean, that's one thing that I think he always had in his to his advantage in the past 2 cycles was he was always out there. And recently, since the convention, he's just kind of laying back.
Yeah. Well, he's doing a lot of fundraising that they don't announce. So that's
see.
part of what he's using his time on. But the other thing is there's a belief in his universe. And it's hard to know whether to credit it or not. He went on Fox and Friends this morning, right? He was on Truth Social yesterday. The rallies are not necessarily a good return on investment of time and money. They're very expensive to stage. And he doesn't like to do events that aren't, the mega rallies, because it's like a, macho brand thing. So would he be increasing his chances of winning the election by going to Green Bay today and having a rally? Not necessarily in their view. And it's easy when things are going bad, good gets better, bad gets worse. It's easy to say, well, things are bad, he should be campaigning more because that would make things go better. They just don't necessarily agree with that.
I think the central thing, though, is what I think A brings up, which is that they're not clear on where to go. So they're going in 5 different directions at once. Now, all presidential campaigns do or can, because you have a presidential target, a vice presidential target, you have issues, you have things, you have policy positions, you have surrogates who need things to say, send surrogates out to say things, to take hits that you don't want the top guy to try, and all of that. And it's not clear to me that they have settled on a theory of the race. No, I think they have settled on a theory of the race. Okay, what is the theory of the race?
That she's more liberal and more incompetent,
right,
and more unsteady than Joe Biden. The problem is he wants to talk about Brian Kemp and he wants to talk about
right. So they have a theory of the race, but it's not his theory. His theory is, I'm me. I'm just gonna. I gotta be me. That's his theory, and their theory is the rational theory. But the theory has to be put in practice. And I think Seth's right. I mean, he's seeing commercials. And again, this goes to a competence issue about the campaign. When it was the campaign just about consolidating the Republicans, I'm not seeing them. And I literally go on YouTube 10 times a day. Every ad on YouTube that I see is a Harris fundraising ad. I'm not joking. I mean, every single, when you go on, the first ad, sometimes there are 2, the first ad is Kamala saying, I want you to join my movement. The time is now. We don't have any time. Give me money. I'm in the algorithm that should be seeing Trump ads. Why am I not seeing Trump ads? I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know whether
they're geolocating you within 2 miles of Zabar's.
Fair enough. But I also search for stuff that should hit. It's not just geolocation.
It's more powerful.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Look. The Matthew's notion of what breaks the virtuous cycle is to me, it's everything. And as Matthew said, that's my view of campaigns. It's about earned media. Not true in other races, but it is in presidential. Does the press think prices have gone up too much under Biden and there is strain on Americans' families? Press does. Does the press think the border is open? Belatedly, the press does. They could be pushing on an open door on those 2 things, but it's going to require the candidate pushing on the open door. It can't be ads. It can't be press statements. And every Republican says, he spent a day attacking Brian Kemp and then 3 days of coverage about that. Now he spent a day talking about debating Joe Biden. There'll be a day of coverage of that. He's just running out of days.
What does it look like if he does it right? What does that look like? What does the day spent well spent actually look like?
Well, I'll tell you what Republican strategists say. Fly to a city and meet with a family who is suffering from inflation under Biden and do an event with them and get coverage for them with him. That'd be meet with the families as at the convention.
The border.
Whose relatives were killed by illegal people in the country illegally. That's what some Republicans would like him to do, rather than attacking the Republican governor of Georgia.
I think there is, when you're talking about process, you're losing. And the decision to complicate the conversation over the debates was the first sign that they are falling into a pattern, or Trump is, or whatever, of complaining about the field of battle and how things are going to go here on forward, rather than saying, I'll debate you anytime, anywhere. I don't care what the rules are. I don't care. He can care about all of that stuff, and they can talk about it behind the scenes. The obvious thing for it to say is, I would debate you every day. You're too scared to come out and talk behind the teleprompter. You come out right now. I'll meet you at 7:00 in the morning, on a tarmac. I don't care where I'm beating you. I'm the only one. If I'm the only one who can get you to talk, come and talk. Don't be chicken. You're too afraid to talk, whatever. They're not doing that. It's strange to me. And it gets to this question of whether and Matt talks about his schedule. I mean, I got to say it. I mean, he's 78 years old. He's not Biden, but he's also not 57. And maybe he's doing a lot of stuff, but whatever. I think we're in a very strange place where his self-confidence is not showing in the way that you might expect it to show. And I think the polling now convincingly makes the case that she, at this moment, if the election were tomorrow, she would win. Or at the very least, we would have like the world's biggest photo finish in the battleground states. Like they're all 1-point races. And yes, if you're a Democrat, you need to be ahead by 4 to win with the Republican Electoral College advantage, and she's close to being ahead by 4. So, Mark Halperin, it's great to be in a position in which I'm not just one of 250 people in a little box on Two-Way, which if you haven't been watching Two-Way, this is my recommendation. You should watch Two-Way, even if you're not a Zoom client of Mark's. This is a conversation daily, almost daily, about politics with pundits and people who've been practically involved in politics, and then ordinary voters, both conducted at a very high level that is very helpful for taking a pulse. It seems to me it's like a daily readout on how people are feeling, and I find it really, really helpful because it's so hard to get that sense of of getting the garbage out of your head and just sort of looking at things clearly. So are you having one tonight you can tell people about?
Yeah, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Just go to my Twitter account or the Two-Way YouTube channel, and you can find out how to sign in and be part of it. And then every Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern time, the morning meeting with Tim Hogan, Democratic strategist, and Sean Spicer. So the evening shows kind of floats based on the news, but morning shows, again, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern. Thank you for talking about it. And we love having you on. You're a fan favorite.
Well, it's exciting. I get I do get very nice comments in your comments, which are better than the kinds of things that people comment to me, like elsewhere. So it's very, very flattering, and
it's a very friendly and very friendly community.
Yeah, but anyway, it is, if you want to try to clear your head, and by the way, that means that there are wildly enthusiastic Democratic strategists and Democratic operatives speaking their wild enthusiasm, and then responded to by old Republican hands who've seen it all and are much calmer and less prone to irrational exuberance, and the dynamic is really very valuable. So That's 2A. Go to the YouTube channel. We'll be back tomorrow. For Matt, Abe, and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.